Okay, the Lord is good. Glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, goodwill to men. Only one God and one mediator between God and men. The man, Jesus the Christ, gave himself a ransom for everyone who believes. For many. As many will believe. Many do believe, and many refuse. The only wise God, the only true God, Lord of heaven and earth, is what Jesus called him. Well, I have a little bit of light left, natural light. I may have to switch over to synthetic, but I want to use it while I have it. So here we are at part 2 on the Contradictions in the Gospel of Mark. Actually starting at Matthew because I was comparing the accounts. I went over the Mark and now I'm comparing it with Matthew 21:18-20. Now in the morning as he returned into the city, he hungered, and when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it, found nothing on it but leaves, and said, "No fruit grow on you forever." And immediately the fig tree withered away. Well, that's what it says. We just read last week in Mark how it was clear that the account was saying that the fig tree withered the next day. Peter made a comment that it had withered because it hadn't withered, according to that account, at the time. So somebody's telling a story. Somebody's making a story up. I mean, this is really the way to put it. Somebody's making stories up that aren't true. Telling a false story. A story that's not true. And when the disciples saw it, they were amazed and said, "Look how quickly the fig tree withered away." So this account claims it withered right before their eyes, right in front of their face. As soon as he spoke to it, it just withered away, and they all saw it, and they were shocked and amazed, and that's the way they claim it went down. But then if you go to Mark, it didn't do it. Did not happen like that. So I wrote an interesting fact under there, right here. There is no account of the fig tree cursing in Luke or John. If we had it, then we'd be able to see possibly which side they took, but there is no account. So here's another interesting fact. Here's 2 verses right here. These are the only 2 verses that appear, amazingly, in Luke about Jesus going into the temple and chasing everybody out. So just these 2 verses, Luke 19:45 and 46. And he went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold therein, and them that bought, saying to them, "It is written, my house is the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." Well, that's it. That's all there is. But I wrote above it, the timing is the same in Luke as Matthew. But only 2 verses are found in Luke, right? So the timing is correct in that it does say that he was entering into Jerusalem and they were praising God and so forth, and then he went into the temple. But that's all that's written. And so now I'm going to read John. There's a lot more written in John. John 2, 13 through 17. And the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So that's what it was. It was the Passover. So that's why he went there. And found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the changes of the money sitting. And when he had made a whip, so he made a whip of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money and overthrew the tables, and said to them that sold doves, "Take these things out of here, and make not my Father's house a house of merchandise." So I wrote, apparently Jesus had a different father than the God of Moses. And I'm going to talk about this a lot. I had a long discussion with the Google AI. And I'm going to tell you about things that you never would have dreamed. And his disciples remembered that it was written, "My love of your temple has caused me to go ballistic." This is my version. Has caused me to go ballistic. That's what he did. And to freak out and flip out. Well, that's basically what happened. That's why I put that there. Here's what it says. I put what it really says. Well, what it says in the King James. The zeal of your house has eaten me up. But what does that mean? Eaten me up. It's a terrible phrase that it's unclear what it means. Totally not clear. But we know what he did. So I put down what he did. He went ballistic. And I've been saying all along that, that was legitimate what they were doing there. Totally legitimate. I'm going to prove that, I think, beyond a shadow of a doubt. A very interesting revelation about this whole scenario. Because I've been saying all along that, they were doing the correct thing to be in there. Selling the animals, because that is what was necessary to operate in the law of Moses. Here is the psalm that comes from, right here. Psalm 69:9. This is technically from the GW, God's Word. And I wrote under it, which I should put in bold. It was amazing. That's why I used the GW, because, like I wrote right here, reproaches. What a terrible word. What an old word that's not used anymore. Yet they leave it in there. I wrote, reproaches is used in all the updated King James Version, and rebukes in the bishops in Geneva, which is before the King James. And rebukes isn't as bad as reproaches. And that came long before the King James. So, it goes on to say, for the enthusiasm of your house has overwhelmed me, and the insults, that's really the best word here, the insults of them that insulted you have fallen on me. So all we're talking about is insults that were directed toward David. That's all there is. So it really isn't a prophecy of what Jesus did. No, it's not. It's once again trying to make an Old Testament verse be a prophecy of what Jesus did. And it doesn't work. So I wrote right here, selling of animals and birds in the temple did not insult the God of Moses. It was doing what he commanded. So, I was thinking about it, and I wanted to see if I could prove historically what I've been saying, that it was a legitimate practice for the people to be selling the animals and the birds in the temple. And where in the temple was it? I mean, what was the layout of the temple? So I asked the AI. I just asked the Google AI. I don't usually talk to the Google AI too much, but he really was amazingly good on supplying information, and really wouldn't quit. Just would have gone on forever. Telling me anything I wanted to know about the historical situation at the time. So, I wanted to know the layout of the temple. I learned a lot of things from this. So here's all the information. There's quite a bit. And this is what he gave me. During Jesus' day, the second temple was a magnificent complex built by King Herod. And with the main temple and courtyards positioned on a vast expanded Temple Mount. I found out that he was the one who did it. Really, it was built by the King Herod, by the Romans. It wasn't even built by the Jews. It was really, Jesus called the temple his father's house, but it was really the Romans' house. But they built it for the Jews, but the Romans still built it. There's a lot of story involved with this I'm going to tell you about. And then it goes on to say, sacrificial animals, including doves, were sold to pilgrims in the outermost public area known as the Court of the Gentiles. So there was a specific area that was built for what they were doing, selling the animals. And they called it the Court of the Gentiles because Gentiles were allowed in. They weren't allowed in other areas. You're going to see there's all sorts of courts that were being built. It took, believe it or not, it took the Romans 80 years to finish it, and then 7 years later, it was destroyed. Is that unbelievable or what? So, it's called the Second Temple. So, layout of the Second Temple. Herod the Great significantly enlarged and beautified the Second Temple, creating a massive complex that included a series of courts with increasing levels of sanctity. A Temple Mount. I put that word there. I even asked him today about what's on the site now. And we know that the Dome of the Rock is there. And that supposedly there's significance for the Jews too. I didn't write it down. I don't know if I believe it, but it's really a Muslim shrine, unfortunately. So the Temple Mount, the entire complex rested on an expanded platform covering approximately 36 acres. That's pretty large. Far larger than the original structure. So here it is, the Court of the Gentiles. and let there be light. So court of the Gentiles, this was the outermost and largest courtyard, accessible to all people, including non-Jews, like I was saying. It was in this busy, sprawling area. So it was a busy, sprawling area where they were doing this. That merchants and money changers set up their booths. That's what it was created for. It was created for that purpose. So I don't understand, like I've said many times, how they didn't put a muzzle on Jesus and arrest him. They arrested him when he wasn't doing anything wrong, and they didn't arrest him when he was doing things wrong. It didn't make any sense. He broke the law big time. He was doing a thing that was totally against Jewish law, and nothing was done to him. Nothing. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. I just don't get it. They had to have had some authorities there. They had to have some police there. There was such a thing as temple police. I mean, were there a bunch of girly men or what? I don't get it. All these people, it's like somebody attacks you. Most people are going to go back at them big time. They're going to go after the person. If some maniac is going in there, I don't care who he is. This was the cultural center for what they did. I mean, you got to be kidding me. If something isn't right, something doesn't make any sense. Then there was another court of the women. Now, it wasn't even finished. It's hard to say how finished everything was, and I don't know how they could even be continuing to work on that. The details of that, I could look for them, but. And so, okay, the court of the women located east of the main temple building. So that was east of the main temple building. This was the next court inward and was accessible to all Jews, both men and women. So no Gentiles could go in there. Court of the Israelites. This was a smaller court for ritually pure Jewish men, whatever that is. Jewish men that were practicing the different rituals that they had. Court of the priests, reserved exclusively for priests. This court housed the large altar for burnt offerings. That's where they did the sacrifices of the animals and the burnt offerings. They weren't doing it in that area, selling the animals. They had to sell the animals. They weren't given free, like I've said many times, to the people. They had to buy them. The sanctuary. Then there was the sanctuary. This was the main temple edifice, which contained 2 rooms, the holy place and the Holy of Holies. The holy place contained the golden menorah, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. The Holy of Holies, the innermost and most sacred room, separated by 2 curtains, where the Ark of the Covenant had once rested. By the Second Temple period, the Ark was no longer present. And nobody really knows what happened to that Ark. There's no information about it. There's no record of what happened to it. That's it. So he went on to say, the selling of the doves and the animals, right here. The selling of the animals, particularly doves, happened in the court of the Gentiles. You see? I guess I do want to read all this stuff here. The convenience for pilgrims. Many Jews travel long distances to Jerusalem for religious festivals. See? like Passover, and could not bring their own sacrificial animals. Too much of a hassle. The merchants in the court of the Gentiles provided a convenient and licensed service by selling ritually acceptable animals. Doves for the poor. Doves were the most affordable sacrifice, often purchased by the poor or by women after childbirth. That's what Luke says Mary did after Jesus was born. The dove sellers were a specific target of Jesus' actions when he cleansed the temple. And so I read that and I said, really? So I thought about it. And I eventually asked him about that. And then I thought about it some more and I realized that they were in cages. The doves, and he confirmed what I said, the birds were in cages, so you couldn't drive them out of the temple. So that's why and I made that comment to the AI, and it admitted I was right, that's why he said, take these doves out of here, because he wasn't able to chase the birds out. If you let the birds out of the cages, they'd be gone, and they'd be flying away, never to be found again, unless you went hunting them. And then you have money changing along with animal sellers. Money changers were also present in this court. They exchanged foreign currency for the special coinage required to pay the annual temple tax, which was the equivalent of a half shekel. That sounds right. So that was a total necessity that they be there. The foreign exchange of currency. Total necessity. Yet we see Jesus going ballistic. So this is the year that Herod started the expansion of the temple, 20 BC. And it goes on to say, King Herod began his massive expansion of the Second Temple around 20 to 19 BC. His construction, which transformed the temple complex into a magnificent structure, continued for decades and was not fully completed until 63 CE, otherwise known as AD, we used to say, only 7 years before its final destruction. And so I asked him quite a bit more about Herod and so forth. There seems to be a differing of opinion when he died. Some say he died in 4 BC, or actually between 4 and 6 BC, and then some say he died in 1 BC. But then obviously, the other kings that took over for him continued the construction. So it turned out that the AI was telling me that some people believe Jesus was born between 4 and 6 BC. So that was kind of a revelation to me, because I never knew that people believed that. And so there's a lot to say about that. Because they're saying that he was alive. If you believe the infants were slaughtered by Herod, which I don't believe, I believe Luke, then that would make his death a certain time frame. Because there's a figure in the Gospel of John, chapter 2, where the Jews state that the temple had been started 46 years before the time that they were talking, you see? But, you start playing with the numbers and it gets pretty complicated, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but you could look that up yourself. So people are not really that sure. They believe someone made an error that put together a calendar, and on and on and on. So now we look at, this is the account, this is the information that's found in John. I'm continuing the study on this issue. This is what we have. It's disjointed. It's not in succession. So the strange thing about the record is that we just read John chapter 2. And it told us how he had made whips, and he was whipping, and he was whipping things, and he was driving the animals out of the temple. And now we look at 10 chapters later, right? We have an account of what the other Gospels claim happened before he did that. So I would have to say that this is another example of the incompetence of the Gospel of John. I mean, it claims Jesus created everything. That's a direct contradiction to the synoptic. I don't really like to use that term, but I felt like using it. I always say Matt, Mark, and Luke. It's direct confrontation there. Contradiction is a rub. And this is also not in harmony because it's saying that much later, like, the chronology is totally off. 10 chapters later, it claims he went in for a feast. That's all he did, according to this account, is go in to a feast. And that's it. But as you can see here, I'll just read a little bit of this. On the next day, it's John 12 through 16, much people that will come to the feast. See? Put it in bold. And the same thing occurred, the palm branches, blessed is the King of Israel, blah, blah, blah. So they thought he was going to be the King of Israel. He was never the King of Israel. No. See, so that's where the massive difference is. Massive difference between Old and New Testament. They found the donkey, and your king is coming, he's not your king, and so forth. And that's all it says. And they made a little comment here, whatever. They didn't understand, and then they understood later on down the line. But so I wrote, according to this account, Jesus was just attending a feast. And that's it. He didn't go into the temple. So I just got a few more verses. Mark 11, 24 and 25. Therefore I say to you, whatever things you desire when you ask, believe that you will receive them, and you shall have them. How many times have I read this verse myself? Many, many times. So I thought about it today, and I said, I wrote this. If you believe, you will definitely be receiving certain things, right? There is no need to ask for them. Right? Why are you going to ask for something that you believe you're going to receive? If you have doubts, then that's a different story. If you doubt that you're going to receive it, then you ask, am I going to get that? You sure I'm going to get that? You sure I'm going to be sent that or whatever? No, but if you're confident, in other words, if you use Amazon a lot and always get the delivery, are you going to chase them down after you order it and make sure that they do it? No, but if it fails, which it can, then you're going to go after the shipper and make sure they ship it, because they don't inform you that it's shipped for a while, or if they don't, then it's not shipped. You could order something online and then they don't ship it. Days can go by and they haven't informed you that it was shipped. Now once that happens, then you're going to doubt, especially if you're using somebody from China or, to ship you something. But if you believe you're going to get something, so it doesn't make any sense, that statement, It's a very strange statement. It really is. And then the next one is probably more strange. And when you stand praying, so here you are not going to kneel or sit, you're going to stand when you pray. That would be stressful after a while. Forgive. Oh, well, I think it's necessary in some cases. If you have things against any, that your Father also which is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. So I wrote, according to these verses, sins are forgiven on the basis of you forgiving others, and not on, forgot that word right there, on Jesus' death on the cross. Because that was really, or is supposed to be, the reason why we have forgiveness is through his substitutionary death. But yet, there's another example that it's claiming that you will not be forgiven. You will not be forgiven unless you forgive others. Well, what do you mean, forgive others? What if somebody has done something horrible and totally evil? I won't even say what that might be, because you can imagine. You just say, don't worry about it. Go your merry way. No. You want them put down, actually. Murderers should be put to death. And then some people should be jailed if they continue to do evil, if they're repeat offenders, they never give up, they have a career of criminality, they should be put down. Well, I think they should be put down, but many people just think, just jail them, put them in a prison, put them in a cell, lock them up in a cage. Well, I don't believe that. Not if they continue to do it time after time, after time, after time. If they keep stealing things from people. Some people go to jail, spend years in prison for something, they get out, and they do exactly the same thing that they did in there. I could go into detail about that, but I won't. So, one more verse. Here's the version of Mark on the abomination of desolation. Mark 13:14. And when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it should not, let him that reads understand. Then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. So this is the correct translation. So I find that amazing how corrupt Matthew can be in the translation. Because this is the correct translation. Because it was a desecration of the altar. I went over that in the messages on Matthew. And this is the abomination of sacrificing swine and pigs on the altar. When you see that pig sitting on the altar there where it should not be, pack it in. Hit the road, Jack. Like I said last time in Matthew, it's too late for that. If they're already there, if the invading army was already in control of the area, of the region, you couldn't flee. Well, I guess you could, possibly, but if you survived, if you hadn't already been dragged away to a foreign country, so it's kind of ridiculous. So I wrote, Mark's version of this verse is correct, unlike Matt.